Welcome to Networking RX, a podcast devoted to helping business professionals like you enhance your networking skills in order to become more proficient giving and receiving quality business referrals and improving the overall quality of your life and the lives of those around you. The Networking RX podcast is a production of AmSpirit Business Connections, an organization whose mission is to empower business success through networking.
Welcome to the Networking RX podcast. I am your host, Frank Agin, founder and president of AmSpirit Business Connections. Today, the day I'm recording this is July 27th, 2020, but as you might imagine in podcasting, we record ahead of time and we kind of get a backlog of programs, interviews, me talking. There's always a backlog. We're always kind of working in advance. But I do know that looking on the calendar, on the release calendar, this is scheduled to come out on November 3rd, 2020. November 3rd is the first Tuesday following the first Monday of November. It's election day. No, it's election day. I don't exactly know what happened between late July and election day. As of late July, Donald Trump was going to be facing off against Joe Biden. And whoever you decided to vote for, I hope you take the time to vote today and exercise your privilege as a citizen of the United States, or wherever you're at. If you have the opportunity to vote in your country, take that right and use it. But what I wanted to do today, I thought was really fitting, and I've been hanging on to this article for a while. Adam Connors, who's a podcasting friend out there, he does a podcast called Network Wise, and he does a lot of things with respect to networking as well. And so when he comes across interesting articles, he'll send them my way. And this is one that he sent to me early in 2020. And the name of the article is, "It's the Network, Stupid. Study offers fresh insight into why we're so divided." Now, what the article really has to do with is what's called social perception bias. Now, if you're a longtime listener to the Networking RX podcast, or a listener in the last 6 months, I guess, I did two podcasts earlier in the year. I released two podcasts earlier in the year. Episode 197, I interviewed a gentleman by the name of Gleb Cispersky. Gleb, or Dr. Cispersky, is a social scientist, and he studies cognitive bias. And there's all sorts of different cognitive biases out there, and I can't even begin to talk about him. He's got a book. He's got several books out there. The one that we talked about when he was on was called The Blind Spots Between Us. But if you listen to episode 200, which came out August 11th, which was called Horns and Halo, I talk about the horns effect and the halo effect, and those are a couple biases that are out there. So there's lots of different kinds of biases out there, but another one that this article has to deal with, the one I'm talking about today, is social perception bias. And it really kind of enlightened me on why we seem so divided, why the world just seems to kind of be at one another's throats, or certainly within the United States. I can't speak for other countries. And you can blame the left, you can blame the right. I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to title this. Do I title this Us versus Them, or Red versus Blue? Or I'm not sure what I'm going to title this particular program at this point in time. But there's certainly a lot that's going on between us, in society. When I say us, I mean that generally. What we find is that what social sciences find is that we tend to start to think like the people we're around. If you found yourself at a job and the people there were very liberal-minded, you would start to tend to move in that direction. I'm not saying you would make a complete shift over there. Maybe you're already there, but if you weren't there, you would tend to shift that way. Or if you had a job where integrity was really important, and they've just talked integrity all the time and treating people well, and you would tend to migrate in that direction. Likewise, if you started to work in a position where people were sort of dismissive of one another and didn't treat each other well, you would start to head in that direction. So we tend to migrate towards I shouldn't say we tend to start thinking about the people who are around us. The culture of the room we walk into, we like to think we can change the culture of that room, and to a degree we can. We shift it a little bit, but that culture of the room is also changing us. And that's an important thing to bear in mind if you're starting to take a position, or maybe a position on a board or a position in a company, is that while you think you might be changing the people and the mindset there, you may to a degree, but you're not going to change it. It's going to change you as well. I like to think of it in terms of, or the motion of the planets, let's put it that way. You know, the Earth rotates around the sun, and our rotation is, our orbit is dictated to a degree by the sun, but it's also dictated by Jupiter and the other planets are there, and the Earth's orbit has a little bit of a wobble because of the moon having an impact on it. Well, the sun, it moves off center as well, even though it's the largest object in our universe or in our solar system. It tends to wobble as well because the planets have an impact on it. It's got the majority of the impact, but the planets have impact as well. And that's how we've discovered planets in other solar systems, because we can look at the suns, and when we see the stars, when there's a wobble, we have a good idea that there's something orbiting that particular star. Enough on astronomy for right now, but it's the same sort of thing. You walk into a room, and the culture of that room, and when I say room, I mean that in general. When you go take a position, or when you're somewhere for a while, the culture of that environment is going to have an impact on you, and you're going to start to think more like those people if you don't already. Now, we tend to try and migrate towards like-minded people, and then studies have shown that we like to hang with the people who think like us. It's more comfortable. It just makes perfect sense. But what happens is that we start hearing from like-minded people. We get into the room with like-minded people. Our opinions sort of get fixed. And so what it talks about in here is, it talks about the studies that they've done, and actually the author talked about living down in Albuquerque, Santa Fe, New Mexico, which is a relatively liberal community, and the author talked about kind of hanging with the liberal-minded people there, but that there also are conservative-minded people as well. There are immigrants and locals that have been around for a while. And if you've ever been to Santa Fe, you'd get the gist of that there are really kind of two communities in one community. But we have this everywhere in the United States. You have Democrats, you've got smokers and non-smokers. And there was certainly a battle going on when the non-smokers want more non-smoking places, and the smokers are saying, well, they have their rights. And you obviously have the ongoing battle between the sexes, male or female. And it's just immigrants, non-immigrants, people of color, whites, social justice. I mean, it just goes on and on. There's lots of different things that sort of divide us in this country. And it's a bad thing and it's a good thing. It's a bad thing because it is, and it certainly creates tension. But I look at it as kind of a good thing because we're trying to resolve these things. If you go to a country like China, for example, you know what? China, you're Chinese. That's it. Japan, you're Japanese. But in much of the Western world, there's a degree of it's a melting pot. There's a degree of all sorts of cultures, all sorts of races, all sorts of religions, and trying to coexist. And there's always going to be issues with that. There's always going to be tensions with that. But we're trying. And I think it's better that we're trying as opposed to not trying. And I'm not trying to get political or anything like that. But yeah, we have issues, but we're trying to deal with them. Maybe not perfectly. People may not be happy with that, but we're trying to deal with them, which is better than not having the issues at all, or not being confronted with. It's a good problem to have, right? It's a good problem to have because eventually we work it all out, and I'm confident that we will, if history has shown that we've worked it out in the past, and we don't want to go too far down that path. But anyhow, but what they found is that people who were surrounded by individuals who think similar to them think their group is larger than it really is, and that people who have a more diverse social circle think that their group is smaller than it really is. So imagine, if you will, let's go back to the 2016 election. I don't know. Today is, Election Tuesday. I don't know what's happening with the 2020 election, but I know in 2016, leading up to it, that if I were a betting man and I had to put money on it, I would have bet that Hillary Clinton was going to win the election. Just that was the sense I got. I was shocked as anybody waking up Wednesday following election to find out that Donald Trump had won the election. And I think part of the reason that there was such a disbelief in this country, not just myself, but if you were somebody who was a Hillary Clinton supporter and you hung with Hillary Clinton supporters and you were surrounded by this voice of support for Hillary Clinton, you probably had this overwhelming sense that we can't lose. Look at us. This group is massive. It's going to be a landslide. And likewise, on the other side, if you were in the Donald Trump camp, you probably had a similar thought that, wow, I'm not, if I'm not watching the news has got to be wrong, because look at all these people. Can you feel all this support? Can you feel all this energy? And so people who are surrounded by other people who think similarly to them think that their group is larger than it really is. And whereas if you're in a diverse social circle, you think that the group is smaller than it is. So if you're somebody who's a Hillary Clinton supporter leading up to that 2016 election, you probably weren't as confident if you were hanging around with people who were Donald Trump supporters. You might not have enjoyed it, but you probably thought, okay, this is not as much of a lock as that I think it is. And this transcends politics. It transcends politics. It really touches on all sorts of issues, and we're divisive about lots of things. We're divisive about lots of things in our communities, and I guess to a certain extent, it all kind of boils back down to politics. But do we put an intersection in here? Or do we put a roundabout in? Do we build a shopping center or not build a shopping center? Zoning, all sorts of different, do we annex this part of the county or not annex this part of the county? There's lots of different issues, with respect to schools. Do we open the schools with coronavirus? Do we not open the schools with coronavirus? So there's all sorts of things that divide us, and, we need to understand that if we're locked in a world where everybody thinks like us, we think that we have a really large group, and we tend to dismiss the opposition. And if we're in a group of a diverse group, we tend to think that the people supporting our position is smaller than it is. Now, there's no right or wrong answer. This is about a bias, and it's the point I'm trying to make in sharing this bias with you is just to recognize that it's there. It's no different than the horns and halo biases. Recognizing that if there's somebody we dislike, we're going to tend to dislike lots about them, and if there's somebody we like, we're going to like things about them that we might not otherwise like, and just understanding that bias is there. And so when we start coming across other people who don't think the way we think, we need to really take a step back and just understand that, they're not bad people. They're just somebody with a different point of view. And I've shared with people, when it comes to politics, I'm fortunate. I'm fortunate. I say that because I'm in an organization where there are pockets of people who are very conservative, and then there are pockets of people who are very liberal. And what I find is very, very interesting is they're all great people. They're all great people. They're all, trying to raise a family. They all believe that their position is the correct position, and that the other position is not. And that's totally understandable. But when you really start to have an opportunity to talk to people and get to know people, you realize that there's a shred of rationality to the way they think, both sides. I find it totally fascinating that I won't name names, but I know people on the left that I just totally look up to. I think they're just great people, just very full of integrity, always looking to do the right thing, but very liberally minded. And then people on the conservative side, same thing. So, the reason I wanted to talk about this, and I don't know what's happening with the election today, and I don't want to say don't care what's happening with the election, because I do care about the country, but I think either way the sun comes up tomorrow, and I think either way we need to treat one another with respect, and that's really kind of the point behind this is. We need to try and get to know people on the other side. And I know it's not easy because we want to hang with the people we want to hang with. I want to hang with the people who think like I think. I want to hang with the people who like to watch sports because I like to talk about those things. It's just like people who like to quilt like to hang out with people who like to quilt. And I'm not trying to oversimplify it, but that's, that's really part of it. It's all, we all have differing views, and, we need to kind of take all that stuff into consideration, and just remember that people are people, and we need to be respectful of everybody and understand that they probably have a rational way of thinking. Don't think everybody, just because they don't think like you on one particular topic, that they're evil, that the lowest common denominator. It's not true. They're likely good people, and just take an opportunity to get to know them. I'll end this with just a quick quote from the article itself. It says, "There is no easy answer when it comes to implementing structural change that encourages diversity, but today's extreme polarization need not become a permanent characteristic of our cultural landscape." And it really is up to us. It's really up to us to decide how we're going to treat people. If your candidate is elected today, kudos to you. I'm sure you worked hard. If you pulled the lever, great. If your candidate didn't win today, be respectful of who is ever elected. Every 4 years or 2 years, depending upon what office we're looking at, or 6 years, I guess, if it's in the Senate, things change, and things can change, but you largely can't control what happens in the grand scheme of things, but you certainly can control your reaction to it, and that's the most important thing. To wrap up, being networked is vital to success, and if you're responsible for driving sales in your business or profession, receiving referrals is the most effective means of generating revenue. And it really always has been. People would rather get referrals than make cold calls. I don't care what anybody says. But anyhow, if you're looking for an easy way to generate referrals, join a chamber, or better yet, get into a networking group like AmSpirit Business Connections. Having said that, think about this. If you had a choice, would you rather be a renter or the landlord? To me, that's a no-brainer, right? You're smart. You want to own the building. So why do you just want to pay to be in a networking organization when you could make money from operating a networking organization? At AmSpirit Business Connections, we're looking for highly engaged entrepreneurs and professionals who want to operate a networking organization. More or less, they want to own the building. If you're interested, and why wouldn't you be, I invite you to reach out to me. We're in the process of our national expansion and looking for organizers and managers to help us. You'll make more money from professional connections and also make money building professional connections.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AmSpirit.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connections. All rights reserved.